Chapter 5. The Archive. She read the letter at midnight. She had waited, deliberately, until the citadel had settled into its deep night quiet, until the footsteps in the corridor outside her door had thinned and finally stopped, until the forest's low hum was the only sound, until she had run out of reasons to keep the letter folded against her sternum and unread. She lit a single candle, sat on the edge of the bed, broke the wax seal with hands that she kept carefully, deliberately steady. Her mother's handwriting, unhurried, clear, the letters slightly tilted the way she remembered from the recipe book, from the back of the painting. She had been, what, when this was written? How old? The paper was old enough to be 20 years, 30, she couldn't tell. She read, "My Saoirse, if you are reading this, then you have found your way to the Thornwood, which means the world has arranged itself the way I always feared it might. I am sorry. I wanted you to have a quieter life than the one I suspect you are currently living. You have always been too much like me for quiet lives to hold you, and too much like your father's people for the Sylvain world to leave you alone, though not the father you know. That is the first thing I need to tell you. Your father, your true father, was Sylvain. His name was Aaron, and he was kind, and he died before you were born knowing you existed. He did not die in any way that was accidental. There are people who have spent a very long time ensuring that the third bloodline does not produce an heir who knows what they carry. You were kept ignorant for your protection. I am telling you now because if you are in the Thornwood, you are past the point where ignorance protects anything. The second thing, the Covenant tree cannot be resealed the way the Sylvain believe it can. The original sealing required 3 bloods willingly given, Ember, Sylvain, and ours. Willingly. The word matters more than anything else in the original text. What you carry cannot be compelled or taken. It must be offered. Anyone who tells you otherwise is telling you something that is convenient for them. The third thing, and the hardest, there is a name you need to know. A Sylvain name. Someone who was present at your father's death and has been present, in various forms, at every crisis involving the third bloodline since. I do not know their current position or the current face. The Sylvain live long enough that both can change. But I know the name they have carried in every record I could find. Vythan. Find the archivist. Ask about Vythan. Then trust your own blood to tell you the rest. It knows more than you have been allowed to know. I loved you before I met you. I love you from wherever I am now. Be careful, my darling, and be angry. Anger has always served our line better than fear. Your mother, Alia. Saoirse sat with the letter in her hands for a long time. The candle burned. The forest breathed. The resonance in her chest was very still, not absent, just still, like something that had been called by its name and was waiting to see what would happen next. Her father was Sylvain. She turned this over, looked at it from every angle, found that it slotted, with horrible neatness, into every question she had ever had about herself, the amber light in her eyes she'd always concealed, the resonance that had no human explanation, the way the Thornwood had felt like recognition from the first moment she crossed into it. She had not been sent here because she was the king's least useful daughter. She had been sent here because someone knew exactly what she was and had engineered this exchange with surgical precision, either to use her, or to stop her. Vythan. She folded the letter, put it back inside her collar, pressed her palm flat against her sternum for a moment, feeling the paper, the pendant, her own heartbeat underneath both of them. Then she got up, put on her coat, picked up her candle, and went to find the archive. She had not expected Erevan to be there. The lower archive was deep in the citadel's foundations, cool and stone-walled and lit by the same bioluminescent moss she'd seen in the forest, cultivated here in glass vessels along the shelving units, giving the whole space a dim blue-green glow that was just enough to read by if you were willing to lean close. She had expected silence and old paper and the archivist's chair, possibly empty at this hour. She had not expected the general, sitting at the reading table in the center of the room in his shirtsleeves, jacket over the back of the chair, silver hair slightly disordered in the way of someone who had been running his hand through it without noticing. He was reading. The worn leather cord from his desk was around his wrist now. She noted this without meaning to. He looked up when she entered. They looked at each other across the archive in the low blue light. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "You couldn't sleep either," she said, finally. "I don't sleep much." He glanced at the candle in her hand, then at her face, reading it, that comprehensive survey, and whatever he saw there made something shift in his expression. Not pity, something more careful than that. "You read it." She had not told him about the letter. She had chosen, deliberately, not to. But it was midnight and she was standing in an archive in her coat with her mother's words folded against her heart, and she suspected her face was telling him things she hadn't decided to say. "Yes," she said. He closed his book, did not ask what it said. Just waited. The particular quality of his waiting that she had come to understand was its own form of offering. "I'm here. Tell me or don't. Both are acceptable." She pulled out the chair across from him and sat. She told him all of it, her mother's words, her true father, the name she'd been given and the instruction that followed it. She told him the way she delivered information she'd decided to trust someone with, plainly, completely, watching his face as she went and reading every microshift. When she said Vythan, his face did something she had not seen it do before. It went perfectly still, not the controlled stillness of discipline, something deeper, older, something that lived below the surface of the general and touched the man underneath, who was 190 years old and had seen things she had no context for yet. "You know that name?" she said. "Yes." His voice was very quiet. "Who is it?" He was silent for long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then, Vythan was a Sylvain scholar. 2 centuries ago. He was one of the original witnesses to the vows signing, not a signatory himself, but present. He wrote the most complete account of the sealing ritual that exists. A pause. He disappeared 80 years ago. His records were archived. His work was considered historical. "Considered," she said. Past tense. He looked at her. 3 months ago, when the anonymous communication arrived telling the archivist to begin translating the old texts, the communication was signed. One word. The archivist did not tell me what the word was until last week, when I pressed her. His voice was so even it was almost colorless. It was Vythan. The archive was very quiet. "He's alive," Saoirse said. "He would be old, even for us. But, yes, possibly. And he's inside the citadel." Erevan's jaw set. "That tell. That small, devastating tell." She leaned forward slightly. "Erevan." She kept her voice low, steady, the way you spoke to someone standing at an edge. "Is Vythan the person you've been protecting?" The gray-green of his eyes was almost black in the archive's low light. Something moved through them, the long, complicated weather of a very old decision being revisited in a single moment. "He was my teacher," Erevan said. "A century and a half ago. He found me after the war, after." He stopped. "He was the one who helped me understand what happened. Who helped me rebuild." A pause. "I owe him a debt that I have been repaying in the form of not asking questions I suspected I wouldn't like the answers to. Until now. Until you made it clear that not asking was no longer something I could afford." He held her gaze. "I have not confirmed it. But I believe, yes. Vythan is here, has been here, in some form, for longer than I've been willing to see." Silence. Saoirse sat back. Her mind was moving fast, assembling and reassembling. "He killed the tree," she said. "Or arranged for it to be killed. He sent the archivist the translation commission. He left volume 1 in my quarters." She paused. "He has been building this for months, possibly years, from inside this citadel. And he knows about my bloodline, which means he knew about my father. Yes, which means he may have been present when my father died." Erevan closed his eyes. Very briefly. Yes. She watched him absorb this, the full weight of it, the shape of what his loyalty had been covering. She felt, with sudden clarity, how much this cost him. Not just the political exposure. The personal rupture. The particular grief of discovering that someone who helped you become yourself was not who you believed them to be. She knew that feeling. She had worn it like a second skin her entire life, every time her father looked past her. Without thinking, without the usual careful deliberation that governed her impulses, she reached across the table and put her hand over his. He went very still. She kept her hand where it was. Warm over cool, her fingers resting lightly across his knuckles. She wasn't looking at him, she was looking at their hands, at the contrast of them in the blue-green light, giving him the privacy of not being watched in this specific moment. "I'm sorry," she said, quietly. "That it's him." A beat, too. His hand turned under hers. Slowly, deliberately, the way he did everything, and his fingers closed around hers. Not tight, just present. The particular warmth of a grip that was asking rather than taking. She looked up. He was looking at her with that expression she still had no name for, but she was closer to naming it now. It was the expression of a man who had decided something was not available to him and was discovering, with some alarm, that it was closer than he'd arranged. "The council session is in 5 hours, he said. His voice was low, rougher than usual. "I know. You should sleep. So should you." Neither of them moved. The archive breathed around them, old paper and cedar and the faint sweetness of the moss, and the thornwood hummed below the foundations, and she was acutely aware of the warmth of his hand around hers, the specific realness of it, the way it made the last 48 hours feel survivable in a way they had not previously felt. "Erevan," she said, softly. "Don't," he said, equally soft. Not unkind. The word of a man who knew exactly where the edge was and was standing very close to it. "Not tonight. There's too much unresolved and I won't," he stopped. "I won't do something irreversible when you're still in danger and I am still the person responsible for you." She looked at him, steadily. "And when the danger is resolved." Something crossed his face, so brief it barely existed, but she caught it. She was becoming fluent in the brief things on his face, something that was not neutral at all, that was warm and complicated and quietly devastated. "Ask me then," he said. She nodded. Slowly, she withdrew her hand. He let it go with a deliberateness that felt like its own kind of answer. She stood. He stood. They were close in the narrow space between the table and the shelving, and she tilted her head back to look up at him, and the blue-green light turned his eyes a color she had never seen before and would spend the next several days trying to forget. "The archivist," she said. "We need to speak with them before the council. Tonight, if possible. I'll send word." His voice had steadied. The general reassembling over the man, which she was learning was not erasure. The man was still there, still close to the surface, still visible to anyone paying the right kind of attention. She was paying the right kind of attention. "Go sleep," he said. 2 hours is better than none. She went. At the archive door she paused, looked back at him, still standing by the table, watching her go with that careful, unreadable expression that she was rapidly learning to read. "Erevan." He looked at her. "When this is over." She held his gaze. "I will ask." She left before she could see what his face did with that. But she heard, very quietly, in the archive behind her, the sound of him exhaling, long and slow, like a man setting down something very heavy and not being entirely sure he should have. She carried it all the way back to her room, and she did sleep, 2 hours, dreamlessly, with her mother's letter against her heart and the memory of warm fingers closing around hers. The archivist was awake. The archivist, Saoirse was beginning to suspect, was always awake. They met in the circular tower room an hour before dawn, Saoirse, Erevan, and the pale-eyed elder who looked at them both upon arrival with the expression of someone who had been expecting this visit and had found the timing merely confirmatory. "Vythan," Erevan said, without preamble. The archivist set down the book. "Yes," they said. "You've known since the communication arrived." "I suspected. I confirmed it 6 weeks ago." Their pale eyes moved between Erevan and Saoirse with the equanimity of someone accustomed to being in the center of things they did not cause. I did not tell you because I did not know which side of this you were on. You have a long loyalty to him. Long loyalties are difficult to see past. What side am I on? Erevan said. His voice was very controlled. The correct one, I believe. Now, the archivist glanced at Saoirse. You read your mother's letter. You knew about the letter. Your mother contacted me 17 years ago. She told me about you, your bloodline, your existence, the fact that she had left documentation. She wanted to know if you would be safe. A pause. I told her the truth. That you would be safe as long as you remained unknown. And that you would eventually become known. The gaze was steady. I am sorry for that. It was the most honest answer I had. Saoirse absorbed this, filed it. The translation, she said. Is it complete? As of last night, the archivist reached beside their chair and produced a document, several pages, dense with notation. The original sealing ritual, complete, this time, not the version recorded for public history. They held it out. Saoirse took it. Erevan came to stand beside her, close, naturally, without apparent decision, and they read it together in the pre-dawn quiet of the tower room. She felt him go still. Beside her at the third page. She read that page twice. Then a third time. The third blood cannot be given once, she said slowly. It has to be renewed. Annually. By a living descendant. That's what sustains the covenant. She looked up at the archivist. The original treaty didn't fail because someone killed the tree. The tree died because no one has been renewing the third blood for generations, the archivist said. Since your ancestor left the territory and her line forgot what they were. The tree has been dying slowly for 100 years. What happened 3 weeks ago was only the final collapse. Then Vython didn't kill it, Erevan said. No, the archivist's voice was careful. He accelerated its death, deliberately, to create the crisis. To force the exchange. Their pale eyes settled on Saoirse. He wants the covenant restored. He has spent decades trying to find the third bloodline's last heir. He is not, I believe, your enemy in the way you fear. Saoirse thought of her father, her true father, Eren, dead before she was born. Thought of her mother's words. He did not die in any way that was accidental. He may not be my enemy, she said. But he is not clean. She looked at Erevan. Someone killed my father to prevent this exact situation. Vython was present. Erevan held her gaze. His expression was steady and aching in equal measure. I know, he said. I know. Will you confront him? After the council session, his jaw was set, not the small tell this time but the full decision, the one that lived in the whole line of him. Whatever he is to me, whatever he was, if he had a hand in Eren's death, that ends every other consideration. She nodded. Outside, the sky was shifting from black to a deep, bruised blue. The council session was an hour away. In the thornwood below them, the first birds were beginning. That complex, layered music she had fallen asleep to and woken to and was already, helplessly, starting to love. She stood in the pre-dawn tower beside a man she had known for 4 days and trusted more than most people she had known for years, and thought about how the world had arranged itself to bring her here, and thought about her mother's letter, and thought about warm fingers in a blue-lit archive, and thought, whatever comes next, I am not afraid of it. She wasn't sure when that had changed. She suspected she knew why. End of chapter 5. Next, chapter 6. What the Ash remembers.